Bula and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. The Minister for Economy handed down the national budget last Friday. In this interview, the leader of Unity Fiji, Mr. Savenaca Narube, will present his response to the national budget. Before we begin, it will be useful to tell those that may not know you your background.
Thank you. I think it's important as we talk about the economy and the budget that we know where we are coming from Unity Fiji. I'm Savenaca Narube, as you all know, I hope. And I was the governor of the Reserve Bank for many years. Before that, I was Permanent Secretary for Finance. And also I've worked with international institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank in Washington, D.C. So I'm quite well versed with our economic issues here in Fiji and, of course, the budget.
In your view, what was the financial position before COVID-19?
I think it's also important that before we talk about this COVID budget, the next financial year of the budget, we understand where we're coming from, because that has a lot of impact in what we can or what we should do. Before the COVID budget hit, we'd faced a few financial issues. One was, of course, the economy was being supported by higher and higher government expenditure. So the growth being spurred by this growth in spending has a lot of risk because debt was rising. And to contain debt, government was beginning to cut down expenses in last year. So that means that the economy was slowing down. It actually declined, as we now all know, in last year. So here we are, a higher debt level, an economy that was slowing down. But also a very important point, I must point out, that we were relying too much on tourism. If you look at all the other sectors, economic sectors, apart from tourism, you see they're all going south. They're all declining. So that's an important issue as we discuss what we can do or what we should do to look back and see what we had done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. How would you summarize the 2020 to 2021 national budget?
It's the most important budget. We all know that in a crisis like this. We were expecting a lot of things to come from the budget. But let me tell you, summarize in 3 ways what I think this budget is. I think it favors the rich a lot and very little for the people. That, to me, is tragic. The other is that it reflects the strength of lobbying. The strength of lobbying. And if you look through the budget, it's quite clear to me that that's the case. You see the fingerprints of big lobbies, and what is in the budget reflects that. So for me, knowing the economy and the economic rationale, this budget doesn't comply with proper economic analysis or fundamentals or rationale, and I'll talk of that a bit later. And lastly, today a lot of people say it's a road to recovery and so forth of this budget. I think it's a road to nowhere, and it's a road to financial ruin.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. You said that the budget reflects lobbying and does not reflect economic rationale. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Let's understand why we are in this crisis. This is a crisis of income. Demand has just dropped off. People then get unemployed, and then income gets, they don't have incomes, and that flows on to businesses and so forth. So the only way that you can grow an economy out of this situation is to encourage demand. Demand in economics is dependent on three things. The first, of course, is the price. The second is, of course, the confidence by consumers. And the third, which is income. In this situation, this particular situation, not the situation of the past, this particular situation, the price impact is going to be very small. And the confidence of consumers is going to be very low. To raise the confidence of consumers, they need to look far ahead and see there's some certainty in them earning income, then you have a bit more confidence. So it all rests on income. And the only one that has income right now is who? It's government. So we have been asking government, don't forget the people, put the income back into the economy. And you are the only one to do it. And this, unfortunately, is not done. So that's why this situation of trying to build demand from reducing prices, particularly of imports, is not going to work. It doesn't have an economic rationale. So for us, we need to look inwards. And to me, the solution for this is going to be here in Fiji, not elsewhere. So I think that's quite important to know. And in the Unity Alternative Budget, we had suggested that government pumps in $1 billion to the affected people to restore their confidence and as well help them in these very difficult times. Now that particular assistance, we were suggesting that half of it be funded from the Reserve Bank of Fiji and half of it through government savings. We received a lot of criticism of that, including from the minister himself, who said that will be inflationary. But the minister doesn't know that the Reserve Bank is already lending to the government to the tune of around $440 million already. So the Reserve Bank is already printing money. For us, that money was important, that it goes to the people to help them survive in these difficult times. And that money will then circulate around the economy. So I think we're approaching it in a very, very different way and a difficult path for recovery. We won't be able to restore demand in that sense.
Government focused a lot on rebuilding tourism. What is your view?
I think everyone, including government, seems to be upbeat about tourism. I hope so. I hope they are right. But if you look at this crisis, it's a health crisis first and foremost. It's a health crisis. So before tourists leave their country to come to us, they have to be concerned about health. So in that sense, the tourist numbers will depend on how this global health situation progresses from here onwards. So to me, whatever we do here in tourism, we just prepare for when tourist comes. We cannot do anything further. We can, but I think the impact is going to be very small. And very importantly, I think we should be quite careful how we open up to tourists. It's our health at stake. It's our health. And I think that we should be very careful about.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. The budget also tries to promote investment. What is your view on this?
Yeah, investment is quite useful or critical in any economic situation. But again, investors, to me right now, are concerned about the confidence of the future, what the future holds, rather than anything else, rather than incentives. There may be some picking up the incentives, but investors' confidence is the main thing now. So what drives investor confidence? again, I think they need to see a very, very credible economic reform and economic roadmap for them to be able to confidently plow their money back into investment. So I think what we have now is a lot of investment incentives. In my view, they're sufficient. What we need to do now is to restore their confidence through proper economic roadmap and rationale on what we are doing. And unfortunately, I don't see that in this budget.
Mr. Narube, what do you think government should have done?
I think first and foremost, it needs to take care of the people. Put the people first. We have been crying out for that for a long, long time, even before this crisis. I think we need to put people first. Who will take care of those that don't have a voice? We hear a lot of support of this budget. From who? The businesses themselves. But who has the voice? Who will speak on behalf of the people? The behalf of sugarcane farmers, that the income has been reduced, and on behalf of other farmers that are struggling right now. Who will be their voice? So I think they need to do that first. The second, as I said earlier, the immediate solution to our economic problems, our demand issues, is not outside Fiji. It's here. It's inside this country. And we didn't take any advantage of that in this budget. We have industries that have been declining. I mentioned that at the beginning of this recording. They're going nowhere. The agriculture, the timber, the other resource-based industries, including garments, manufacturing, and so forth. We take care of that first at this time. Use the tax giveaways to the rich that is in this budget to plow back into these sectors. They will give us the immediate employment that we are thinking about. They'll give us the immediate increase in incomes and security, food security as well. So the answers are here. Not to give away 60 million to tourists that will come to Fiji. I don't think that is a very good strategy. So that's something that I would have liked to see. And I think in this crisis, as we deal with it, and we don't know how long it is, we must undertake the necessary changes and reforms. The first one is that we need to clean up the government expenditure. There's a lot of wastage in there. We have identified that in our alternative budget. Some have been implemented in this budget, but there's a lot more that hasn't been touched. So there's still a lot of wastage, inefficiency in our spending. Secondly, we need to start reforming what I call the state-owned enterprises, SOEs. They are chewing up a lot of our money, a lot. This year, alone, $1.6 billion been allocated to SOEs, the statutory bodies. That's a lot of money. We take this time to reform them, make them more efficient, so they can use their money wisely. I think we need to take this opportunity as well to make the whole economy efficient. Reform, economic reform, particularly in the private sector, how government deals with the private sector. I think we need to take that initiative now while we wait for this demand to rise. And I think we take that time. I think there will be time well taken to help us prepare for the future growth of the economy.
Thank you, Mr. Narube. Government deficit will be over 20% of GDP, and debt will rise to over 80% of GDP. These are very high numbers. Are you concerned about our physical health?
I am extremely concerned. I'm a bit scared of what lies ahead. I thought that our fiscal position, as I've mentioned, was quite weak before the crisis happened. But now, I know we are heading into very, very serious problems in the future. We will have a mammoth struggle just to crawl out of this hole in the future. Our children and our grandchildren will have to share this burden, unfortunately. I think many analysts have said we need to borrow at this time. There's no other choice. I fully agree. But I must stress one thing. We need to borrow responsibly. And unfortunately, I don't see that in this budget. Why are we borrowing more now to get people drunk? Why? What's the rationale for that? Why we are borrowing more now to help rich people buy luxury cars? Why are we doing that? Why are we borrowing now to bail out the car dealers? Why are we putting money into those companies that offer hire purchase? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. So I think for us to borrow more to pay for fringe benefits, which it's more fringe benefits that are paid to who? To the ministers. To who? To the richer people. So why are we borrowing more for this? So this to me, it doesn't make economic sense. And it's taking us down that road to financial ruin.
This is a scary situation. Where will Fiji end up at?
That's a question we should all ask ourselves right now. Ask ourselves. We have seen the management of finances before this crisis. Now we have seen the responses that, to me, it's not going to help us, but it's going to load us with debt situation, as you have mentioned, over 80%. And the quality of that debt, the spending on that debt, is not going to be of high quality. So we will be saddled with higher debt, very little impact on the economy. So what will that mean? It will lead us deeper into this crisis, and we will suffer for a lot more longer than would have been necessary. We'll create that fear and uncertainty in our people of what lies ahead, what will tomorrow bring, where will they find food for the family, and so forth. So it will lead to more social impact of this crisis. Domestic violence, drugs, and suicides are increasing because of this. So we're going to pay seriously for some of these things that we should have done, but not in this budget. So what happens when we reach the cliff, the financial cliff that I've been talking about for the last 3 years? What happens? We will ask those that normally come and rescue countries, like the International Monetary Fund, to come and bail us out. And you know what? That'll be very painful. Painful for who? Painful for the people. So to me, this budget is a road to nowhere. It will lead to financial and economic ruin. I really urge the opposition parties that are in parliament to please hammer home this particular message in next week's parliament debate. Thank you very much.
That ends the Q&A with the leader of Unity Fiji, Mr. Savenaca Narube. Please do tune in again with us as we go more in-depth relating to Mr. Narube's response to the national budget. Vinaka.